Welcome to Fueling Your Legacy, hosted by Samuel Knickerbocker. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a new, stronger foundation essential in creating your legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. Welcome back to Fuel Your Legacy, and this week is one I've been looking forward to. I've spoken with my wife about it. How can we really maximize the joy that comes from this topic? This topic is about knowing where you're coming from. So in Utah, we have a holiday in the third week of July, and it's Pioneer Day. We celebrate when the pioneers came out west, and that's a big thing. Like the idea that somebody's uprooting their life from wherever they are on the planet a lot of times, and they're migrating somewhere else. It's a huge issue politically right now, is that the migration of families. And I have clients, I know people who they came here as children, their parents brought them here, and they really don't have a lot of connection to their previous previous home where their family came from. They're essentially American, but because they don't have the legal status of one who was actually born here, then they could at any moment, based on some of the laws that are on the books, they could get deported back to wherever they came from. They get kicked out of our country. And it's not just people from Southern America, it's people from all over the world who are in that situation. They come here, they're looking for a better life. They're doing the best that they can. They're working. They're just trying to provide for them and their family. And for whatever reason, something happens and they don't get to stay. And that's unfortunate. But the purpose of me bringing that up is, do you know where you came from? It's so easy for somebody who is maybe the fourth, fifth, sixth generation American. Okay, I'm going to say that in quotes, because what define an American, right? But fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation. And for us to really appreciate what we have, where we came from, and for us to treat others with that same respect and say, okay, look, I know that you're coming here because you want something better. Of course. Like, who doesn't want something better out of life? And so that is a huge thing that I want to talk about today. For myself, I grew up thinking I had one grandpa. That's what I thought. I think I always knew that my mom's dad was like my mom's dad and the person I knew as grandpa were not the same person. I think I always knew that. I knew that my grandma got remarried. But on the other side of my family, on my dad's side of the family, I didn't know that my dad was adopted. I didn't know that my grandpa and my grandma didn't get married until my dad was virtually an adult, and that my dad didn't actually get adopted and change his name from his previous name until he was over 20 years old. Right? So understanding the history, understanding what's transpired in our lives is really, really valuable, because it helps us gain greater understanding, greater compassion, greater love for those around us, and helps us be more charitable and less judgmental, less condemning of other people's behaviors and the way they live their life and why they live their life the way that they do. All of those things become much easier to understand and much easier to accept once we've gotten to a perspective of at least understanding where we came from. So for me, because I have a unique last name, unique-ish, Samuel Knickerbocker, so Knickerbocker is my last name, then I get asked a lot, hey, where did that name come from? And there's no solid spot where it came from as far as people coming over. It's roughly around 1675, 79, somewhere around there. Some people came over, by best guess, came over to through Ellis Island, and they were Dutch. So they either came from Holland or somewhere in that area, and they came over and basically created the name Knickerbocker. Now, for most sources, they're going to say that person's name was Herman Jensen Van Wy. And he came over, wanted a more American-sounding name, whatever that means, and he got the name Knickerbocker. I've read 2 or 3 essays, college theses on this name, because it's a pretty big name if you're in New York. Generally, any people who were in New York, there's a certain area of town, they were all called Knickerbockers just by virtue of being in that area of town. Another area where Knickerbockers comes up is it's a golf style pant, right? And the reason that that's the name of the pant is by association to people who are Knickerbockers who came from Dutch where they wore those types of pants. And so understanding that that's kind of the history of the name, that's valuable. But more importantly, understanding that I was adopted into the name. I was born having the name Knickerbocker. My dad was adopted in though. My dad's maiden name, you could call it that, is Mikel, which is French or something of that sort. And Mikel, I believe. And he was adopted by my grandfather. Well, who was my grandfather? How much of the name did my grandfather have? My grandfather, he was full Knickerbocker, right? But his father had 2 wives. And so some of the people who have the Knickerbocker name, they have multiple relations, you could say. And so he has some stepsisters and some stepbrothers, and they all have different names, yet they're all kind of related to our family. And I'm kind of related to them as well. So I grew up with cousins who I knew that they were half cousins. They were not, and when I say half cousins, they're of no blood relation to us because they were from my grandpa's first marriage, and I'm from my grandma's first marriage. So there's no real relationship there, yet we carry the same last name, and we grew up as cousins. So understanding kind of that aspect of the play is part of it. The other part of it is, though, even though we're not blood Knickerbockers, I'm not a blood Knickerbocker, who raised me. And for me, my grandfather, who adopted my father, he is one of my greatest idols in life. I look up to him, always have. I don't think he was perfect. No, I don't know anybody who is perfect, but he was an incredible leader. He loved immensely, and he was, for the most part, in my experience, he was fairly patient. Yet he was a stern man, and you didn't want to make him mad, but as a general rule, he was fairly patient. He helped me a lot when I was younger. I was homeschooled, and so I'd go over there, and he would help me do various activities. We did pottery together. He helped me read and learn science. We did activities learning science. He taught me how to garden. He taught me how to work. He did a lot of things, very influential person in my life. And so even though we're not blood from him, he is still somebody that I would say I adopted a lot of my being from. Now, to add even more context to that, there was a time when him and I were driving in his little red Ford Ranger pickup, and we were driving back from the dump, as I recall, windows down. It was a nice summer day, so warm air blowing through, and we were listening to the radio, and he leaned over, turned down the radio, put his hand on my knee, and said, "Hey, Sam, you have a voice that's extremely pleasant to listen to. You could lead people, maybe even be on the radio someday." And at the time, I was 5 or 6 years old. Somehow I knew what it meant to have a radio voice, and I didn't want, or a radio face rather, and I didn't want that. So I was like, oh, that's a bad sign, right? I didn't want to be on the radio, but I did still believe and adopt the identity. And we've been talking the last few weeks about the story we tell ourselves about manifesting. I adopted the identity that I was going to be a great leader with my voice, and that I wanted to be a public speaker. I wanted to be a motivational speaker and lift people up with my voice. Well, I kind of sucked at that for the next few years of my life. I became very abusive, verbally abusive to my siblings. I was a leader, and people did listen to me, but not for the right reasons, I found out later. And that was painful. And I had to go back and say sorry to people. I had to change the way I was using my influence and the gift that I had adopted because of the identity that my grandfather gave me. So that's just a small talk into understanding your history. What are some other benefits to understanding where you came from? What about some health history? What about the mentality of kind of understanding that neuropathic pathways, they actually come from our childhood and from our parents' childhood, and they are actually transferred. Like there's full-on studies of how something traumatic can happen to somebody before they ever even get pregnant, and then they get pregnant, and those traumatic events that happen probably in the adult's childhood, that traumatic event will get transferred through energy and through experience down to that child who was not even thought of at the time of the traumatic event, but now is still suffering from some of that trauma because of what's happened in previous, we'll say previous lives. It's not like this previous, reincarnation type life, but it's a previous experience that happened in somebody else's life. And we as humans, we still suffer the consequences of what's happened to multi-generationally past, right? My grandfather, he was essentially an orphan. I mean, he wasn't complete orphan, but when he was young, his dad went off to find work because his mom died. Dad went off to find work, and they got put into religious foster care and passed around family to family. And so things like that are happening all the time. And these traumatic events that happen to you and that happen to people in the past, those have the ability to perpetuate through multi-generationally if we don't change it. And the positive side of that, right? And so everybody's like, oh, that's terrible. What's going wrong? Well, here's the positive side, and this is what excites me about understanding where I came from, is that in this moment, I have the opportunity to heal the past, change the future, and create what I want in my own legacy. I can define by the way I choose to experience life, by the way I choose to experience my income, my fitness, my health, my faith, all those things, and the connections that I choose to build inside myself. By biologically happening, I'm going to be able to transfer those things to the multi-generational. And that's going to be biological. It's not going to be, I would say biological and chemical, but it's not going to be just like a thought process. It's something that's actually happening. So when people say, oh, don't be the weak link, right? No, don't necessarily think of it as a negative thing, but think of it as, okay, I have the opportunity now to alter the history and alter the future of where my family stands. That is an exciting prospect. That's what we're going to talk about this week, is how to alter the future. Now, on Friday, I'm going to be interviewing, because all of my grandfathers, both of my dad's original father, like biological father, and my wife's, my mom's biological father, they both died when I was one of them died when I was very young. The other one died about maybe 4 years ago, but I never met him to my recollection. And then my mother's stepfather, he died about five-ish years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago. And then my dad's adopted father, Grandpa Knickerbocker, he died, I think in November of 2015. And then on the day of his funeral, I proposed to my wife, Charlie, and so I'll never forget that day for multiple reasons, but I wanted it to be on a day that I was never going to forget. So we've done a lot of, I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I try and create emotional connections to the days that are of most importance to me, and both of those things happen in one day, and it's a very emotional point in my life. But understanding where you're coming from, where you're going, how to create that, super excited. Because both my grandfathers are dead, or all of them are dead, then I'm going to interview my wife's grandpa. And he has some incredible stories, not just about building a legacy, not just about building a family, but also he was an incredible entrepreneur, and he's got some really fun stories, some real stories, some heartbreak stories about entrepreneurialism and the habits, the mindsets and behaviors that are necessary to create a meaningful legacy and also become financially secure for your family, to remove a lot of those stresses throughout the next few generations. So with that being said, we are super, super excited. And then this Wednesday, we're going to be doing another book review, and we will be launching another registration round for those of you who would like to be part of the Fuel Your Legacy Blueprint webinar. And we're going to be launching another round here on Wednesday. So we'll talk to you soon, and have a great day. I'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.
Thanks for joining us today. If what you heard resonated with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me so I can give you a shout out on the next episode. And thanks to all those who have left a review. It helps spread the message of what it really takes to build a legacy that lasts. Catch you next time on Fueling Your Legacy.